Mike, welcome. It's such a pleasure to speak with you today.
Andrea, it is good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Mike, you are the founder of Charitable and have worked at the intersection of technology and philanthropy. Tell us about the profound personal experience early in your life that has shaped the work that you do today.
Yeah, look, I have a different life story, Andrea, to most people. I definitely don't sound like the way I look. I know that. I wasn't born here in Australia. So my life story in so many ways has shaped kind of what drives me to do what I do today. As a child, as the story goes, I was abandoned at birth in India. So a pediatrician walking through a field found a newborn child just laying in the grass, picked them up, and took them to an orphanage. Now, in India, there is something called the caste system. And within the Hindu religion, they believe that whatever you've done in your previous life determines the circumstances amidst which you were born. Now, for me to be abandoned and left in a field, they thought I must have done something fairly heinous in my previous life. And because of that, I was unable to be adopted and declared what you call an untouchable or a Dalit. So I was placed into an orphanage, and in many ways, my fate was sealed. This was in 1981. But in 1977, a family here in Australia applied for an adoption. They had two biological daughters of their own, and they, over the next 4 years, Andrea, they heard a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of red tape, but nothing conclusive on adopting a child. In fact, after 4 years of trying, they decided to give up on adoption. And as a way of sort of closing that chapter, they'd spent the money they'd saved on adoption for a trip to Disneyland with their two daughters. They wanted to close the chapter and move on. Anyway, while they were away, and over the sort of first 6 months of my life, in the orphanage, a lady who was looking after me took a liking to me. One evening, under the cover of darkness, she took me and she smuggled me across a state border where she bribed some nuns with cash to change my birth certificate. And they would change my birth certificate meant that I could be adopted under a different state's law. And strangely enough, the nuns accepted the bribe. They changed my birth certificate and I was placed for adoption. This family got back from their trip to America. They got a phone call saying, hey, look, the adoption's gone through. Your son will be at the airport at the weekend. And they said, that is crazy. No way. It is not possible. We've got no money. We have no plan. Anyway, they were a religious family, a Christian family. And so they were praying about it that night, saying, we're in big trouble here. We need something to happen. The next day, the mother was driving a car with her two daughters. She had a car crash and wrote the car off without a scratch or a bruise to anyone in the car. And she said what was a miracle was that 2 days later, the day before I was due to arrive at Sydney Airport, the insurance money had been returned to her bank account, and it was to the exact dollar that was needed to pay for the adoption. Andrea, not a dollar more, not a dollar less. And so that's how I began my life in Sydney, Australia, growing up as an adopted child. I was the only brown kid in school until I was 16. And there's all sorts of stuff that comes with that, Andrea. There is a lot of racism, a lot of ostracization, a lot of fight for identity. And so, I mean, I could keep talking, but in many ways, that's the heartbeat or the foundation of what has shaped and drove me today to build Charitable, the Global Impact Summit, and other projects we're involved in.
Wow, what an incredible story. How old were you when you began your journey with that family in
So,
Australia?
yeah, it's a great question. I was 6 months old when I arrived here in Sydney. And what was really interesting is that the lady who smuggled me across the borders was also the lady that brought me out on the plane. And I knew her only by her first name, Kalpana, but I'd never met her. And it was only 2 years ago, Andrea, that actually probably a bit longer now. During COVID, I was running a charity, so a $10 million charity here. I had sent like a little update about my story in a newsletter, and someone from about 2 hours south of Sydney wrote back and said, hey, I recognize the signature in that photo. They were the person that helped me adopt our child too. And more than that, we have their contact details. Do you want to reach out to them? And It turns out that Kalpana was stuck in India during COVID, but actually she'd been living in Sydney 15 minutes from me for the last 20 years, right? And I had no idea. In fact, she had been just awarded an Order of Australia medal for helping more than 40 adoptees, helping work in mental health services and well-being for young people. And then through this amazing turn of events, I got in touch with her, and she sort of said cautiously on the phone, sorry, who are you again? And I said, look, my name's Michael. My middle name is Kartik. And in her broken English, she just started saying, you're the one. You're the one. I said, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. And she said, oh, we changed the courts for you. And I'm like, okay, because there's always part of me growing up thinking, man, is this story made up? Is it actually true? Is it too good to be true? She's like, we changed the courts for you. And beautifully, I was able to then attend her Order of Australia ceremony. And after more than 40 adoptions, I was the first sort of adult adoptee she's ever been reconnected with and reunited with. And more than that, I was able to have a lunch with my parents and her. And I thought they knew her, right? But it was actually the second time in their life they've ever met her, because the first time was when she handed me to them back in 1981.
It seems like you have many angels in your life that have really brought you on journeys that connect you with the right people at the right time. How incredible. What can you tell us about the key challenges that you referred to earlier in terms of how difficult and challenging it was for you living in Australia until you were 16 years old and seeing so much negativity? Because at the same time, when you hear your story, it's filled with so much love, and despite the odds, things going super well. Your journey in the early years were very, very challenging because you were different, or at least perceived to being different in the school that you were at, and so on. How did you overcome that growing up? And is that still something that weighs on you today as an adult?
Look, I think, well, one thing I do want to say before all of this is that we live in a society and culture today that likes to um, glorify story. And so what happens is in personal stories, and this is a real encouragement to anyone listening today, is that there's actually no hierarchy in testimony or story or life story. We live in a society and culture that loves to put levels in them and loves to say, hey, you've got a profound story, wow. But if we're not careful, that can also leave others feeling like my story has no value. One of the things I have learned throughout my life is that no matter what your story is, it has power to those around you. There are many people who share it. You may have grown up in a safe home, you may have grown up in a wealthy home, but you still have a life story that has purpose, that has like a plan to it. And what matters most, in my view, is learning how to articulate it in a way that brings others to life, creates a sense of safety and belonging that helps people go, story in so many ways, Andrea, is a sense-making tool. And if we can learn to articulate our stories well, no matter what they are, I think you'll find that it gives people a safety, gives people a sense of belonging, and used well can give them a sense of purpose. And so that's one of the really things that's important to say at the top, is that you can have an elaborate story, or you can have one that you think is, relatively safe, but they can still have the same impact when it comes to purpose. But to your question more about identity and belonging, I still remember in year 4 here in Australia, walking across the playground and having a girl in year 6 walk up to me and say, "You're black, mother," and spitting all over me. But I still remember people with hockey sticks coming in to my front yard to try and beat me up. I remember all of the things that come with sort of race and culture and the collision of that, where people don't know how to understand it. Now, society and culture has evolved so much since the 80s. I mean, we're talking 40 years ago, right? And so it was a challenge, but it wasn't as big a challenge as others had faced. And the reason being, I had 2 older adopted sisters, and so they had a social community around them that kind of wanted to win their love and affection. And their love and affection was, well, if you don't support my brother, you're not in this crew. And so the fact that they were popular meant that I had cover. So, number one is super thankful to my sisters. Number two is my neighbors. Back in those days, man, you didn't play on devices, you played outside and you played with those around you. And so I had this great connection of people in our street, kids the same age. I was good at sport. And in Australia, sport is a social currency, right? If you're good at sport, you often will get picked and belong, particularly on the sporting field. So I did have a lot of opposition, but I also had a lot of support in helping me create a sense of who I was. And to your question, come forward 40 odd years, there's still a lot of times where skin color, race, and prejudice play a part in communication. But what I've done is devoted my life to helping people understand that most people are just scared of what's different. And if you can give them a different version of that in the middle, it might only be one link in that chain, but I get to change their lens for that brief moment on what they believe to be the certain behavior linked to a certain culture or whatever it might be.
Let's dive deeper into charitable and its mission and how our audience could potentially even get involved and contribute.
So charitable is in many ways an extension of like a pay it forward. If I look back over my life from the nurse that looked after me to the lady that smuggled me across borders to nuns that changed birth certificates to families that chose to embrace and adopt me, my life has been earmarked by kindness. And to be honest, for the most part, courageously women-led kindness, which blows my mind to be like I'm 100%. I have two daughters, 16 and 13, and I just think women are some of the most courageous people on the face of the planet and have earmarked my life and my sense of purpose. Part of my story as well, Andrea, is that off the back of all that childhood, I spent 10 years, probably more than that actually, growing a $10 million charity, working in humanitarian aid in some of the most conflicted countries on the planet at times in world history when most people didn't want to be there. So whether that was, Syria and Iraq at the height of the war with ISIS, whether it was through North Africa being on lockdown in hotels because of risk of kidnapping for ransom, whether it was Central Asia working with former drug addicts and murderers in the likes of Kazakhstan and Tajikistan and those kind of places, I've seen the intersectionality of oppression and kindness firsthand the world over. And one of the things I learned in those moments and those interactions was that generosity and kindness is the most universal language on the planet. Right, so every social culture, every tribe experiences grief, but it's manifests differently from culture to culture, tribe to tribe. Every culture on the planet experiences humor, but again, the idiosyncrasies of humor can leave you feeling included or excluded in a moment's notice. But generosity is different, right? It's earmarked by simply a hand out or a hand up smile the world over. It has been for millennia and it transcends things like race, religion, gender, sexuality, wealth, social status, culture, and it becomes a social cohesion tool. And so that's in so many ways what drove me to begin and start charitable experiences all across the world, realizing that there is this unique, like, glue that brings society and culture together, and it's generosity. And so I spent a couple of years researching the way that the world has been reshaped by the likes of Uber, Airbnb, Spotify, Netflix, all of those kind of big tech platforms that have reshaped the way we behave. And I learned a couple of things. So I learned that accessibility will always increase the size of a market. Right, if you make it easier to consume anything, usually that thing grows. If I look at it from a music perspective, people have never listened to more music than through Spotify, Apple Music, or others. If I look at takeaway food, man, particularly in Australia, Uber Eats has changed the way and accessibility to food, and because of that, people will now just get stuff home rather than cook. Travel with Airbnb, when we made every home an opportunity to stay, all of a sudden travel grew. Accessibility will always increase the size of a market. Number two is that these big companies that changed the way we engage with the world around us kind of did five things to us. They gave us choice, they put us in control, they gave us convenience, right? Like sort of order it to your home anywhere you want, anytime you want. They gave you a sense of community, so there's inherently social elements to it. and they gave you the confidence that it's legitimate, it's safe, and it's secure. So I took both of those elements. I took accessibility and I took the five C's, and I built out a product specifically to do with giving called Charitable. And in Australia, you can find any registered charity in the country. You can make a fee-free, commission-free donation. So we give you choice, we give you control. You can do one-off monthly giving. You're in control. Start, stop, give whenever you want. Apple Pay, Google Pay. We made it inherently convenient. Any native app based phone with a smart connection or internet connection can make a donation in seconds. You can save your favorite charities for quick recall. You can avoid being inundated with additional requests for money because you can give through one thing. You get an annual giving statement, so you never need to look for a receipt again. So we focus on convenience. We focus on community, so you can see how many other people have liked the charities you engage with. You can get stories, messages, all of those kind of things. And then we gave people the confidence that it's legitimate. Australian business, registered charities, local board governance, all of these kind of things that help people feel a sense of confidence. And so that was what we did. We redirected an understanding of generosity being the only unifying language on the planet into how have our lives been reshaped, and how what might we make generosity easier? Because if we can do that, I believe we can increase the size of generosity.
What have you learned from the stories of the people that have benefited from the generosity from charitable that people are sharing through the community? Is there one or two specific stories that have truly touched you that you may be able to share with us?
Yeah, look, I think from the user side of things, one of the stories that really resonates with me is, historically people would say apps are for young people, but our oldest user is in their 80s. And the reason they use Charitable is because they are incredibly generous, but they fell victim to a scam recently over the phone. And that destabilized their whole trusting, their confidence, their trust in themselves, their willingness to assume best intentions with people calling and charities making requests. Now what they say is that I can't get scammed, right? So I can get a phone call and someone can say, "Hey, I want you to help cancer." And they can say, "I really want to do that. I'm going to give through Charitable." Because it doesn't matter. I'm no longer giving my details over the phone. I'm no longer punching them into a website I'm not sure about. I can give on my own terms, and I'm no longer scared to give. That, Andrea, is one of the most beautiful stories, because what we've done is we've been able to create a sense of safety, accessibility. We've preserved their donation income to the charities they love, and we've restored a sense of self-confidence and joy in their life, because it's so disheartening when a couple of bad operators can really pull down someone's self-confidence, can strip away their joy. And our hope is that we can provide platforms that bring a different narrative to that.
What have you learned about humanity and about joy across all your experiences to date?
It's a great question. I think that I would say that in most of the conflicted countries I've worked in, joy is far easier to find than it is in Western nations. But I've seen a lot of people survive and flourish in oppression. I have seen very few survive and flourish in prosperity. And I think that's a very interesting, it's an interesting lesson when it comes to joy, that in a world of ease and convenience, it can actually be a lot harder to find joy. Now, one thing to be really clear on is I'm not saying they have it better off. What I'm saying is that in Western cultures, I want to pay the respect that is due, is that joy can actually be super hard. People don't give it the credit that it's due, that it's not as easy to go, look, I have everything, therefore I'm happy. That's not true at all. In fact, in all of the experiences I've had in well and truly more than 30 or 40 countries around the world, I would say that joy in Western cultures is way harder, and it takes so much more to find. And my encouragement is to anyone listening who might be feeling a sense of oppression, depression, or just general sadness in life. Hey, I want you to know that particularly in Western cultures, I think that's normal. I think it's harder. And I want to empathize with you that joy is not easily found, it's hard fought, but it's one of those things that if you can unlock it and find it, it brings a sense of hope, it brings a sense of happiness to life. And And there's two things that I would say that people talk about is gratitude and happiness. And to be honest, it's whatever works for you. But I'm at the happiness end, is that people talk about having gratitude journals. I'd much rather have a moment of happiness journal, right? Because I'm like, what I realized was even in the journey of charitable startup, man, some days it feels like you're winning, other days feels like you're days from dying. You lose almost everything around you. You lose income, salary. Like there's all these things that I'm not thankful for. There's no gratitude there. It's an absolute slog every day of the week. But there are moments in time throughout the day that I can be happy. And already I think of today, I'm like, I get up and I go for a walk quite early every morning. The sunrise this morning, they've been doing some hazard reduction burns here in Sydney. So there's an element of smoke and mist and fog and dew. And like the lighting this morning on my walk was just stunning. And it was a true moment of happiness. And if I can just find one of those every day, then in the face of a culture and well-being that sort of suppresses joy, it's how I'm kind of trying to rejig my way and my pathway to it. I just try and find even one moment of happiness from any given day and start telling myself, I don't need to be thankful for this because there's a lot that I'm struggling with, but I can find a moment of happiness. And for me, that's the pathway back to joy.
And if there would be a recipe to finding more joy and living a more joyful existence, what would be the three main ingredients in your view?
I think it would be a sense of happiness. I think it would be um, a sense of, it's going to sound super weird. I reckon we need to get better at learning to love ourselves, right? We're pretty good at serving the world around us, but often it comes from a deep sense of insecurity. Learning to look at the shadowy areas of your life and overcome them is really crucial to that. Because when I look around society and culture today, one of the greatest suppression tools to joy is, I think, a deep dissatisfaction and unhappiness in oneself. Now, that's again, it's incredibly hard to overcome, Andrea, but understanding it and identifying it is really crucial in then creating a pathway forward. So, looking at yourself, learning to be happy, and then acts of kindness and generosity are the three areas that I think find joy. Because what I want to do is I want people to give out of an overflow of who they are, not in an attempt to try and make them like, not to give out a sense of guilt, but give out of a sense of purpose. And I think if we can teach and retrain people to do that, then you will find joy.
And what is your life purpose?
It's a good question. I think mine is to help others find a sense of safety, to find a sense of belonging, and to help them feel like they're noticed in the world. If we can create system, tools, platforms, or structures that allow that, then I will die a very happy person. I believe that there is a purpose and a plan for each and everyone's life, but we so often get caught up in society and culture that's based around hierarchy of story, of wealth, of all these other things. What I want to do is help people realize, mate, tell me a story. Let me see and help shape it to a sense of purpose. Because we so often think you need to be at the far right hand end of the scale, a billionaire, successful business, amazing startup to make a difference in the world. You actually don't. Man, you can do it with $1 or you can do it with $1 million. What matters most is how you direct it and how you help other people feel a deepening sense of purpose. So my life's passion is saying, hey, how can I help create the systems, tools, structures like Charitable that make it easier for you to live out your sense of purpose? Because if I can just be the handshake in the middle of that, the platform, the scaffold, whatever it is, then we can write life stories all over the place, right? Generosity is the only use of universal language. Story is a sense making tool. And if I can create technology that links you with the outcome, right? So you can give $1 to outcome one, then we can make their life better. We can make your life better. And all we've done is provided the throughput for that.
If your life story started differently, do you think you would still be doing the work that you do today?
I think I would. Again, I think we can put way too much on life story. I mean, maybe a better question is if I remain in India, would I be doing the same thing? I think the overwhelming answer to that is no, I wouldn't. I think that I have been incredibly lucky in the life that I've got here in Australia. If I grew up in Australia, if I had the same kind of parents that I had, no, I think I'd be doing exactly the same thing because it's an extension of who I was. If I had remained in India in an orphanage, I can almost guarantee you that it would be a fight for survival. I'm not entirely sure I'd still be around. And I think all of the same qualities and traits would be under there. My question diving into this sort of for the first time ever, I've never been asked it before, but would be that I reckon I would redirect them for a different purpose and probably far more based around one of survival than it is purpose and destiny. And I now think to myself, I'm like, actually, what would those traits look like if my sole focus was on survival? I wonder if it'd be more self-centered, selfish, transactional, probably abusive, to be honest, because all I would be doing would be leveraging those gifts to help me survive. Whereas here and growing up in the world and culture that I have, I'm now leveraging those gifts in helping other people grow and find a sense of purpose. So I think that's probably a better answer or more truthful answer to your question is that I think if I had stayed, it would look very different to had I been here.
You mentioned earlier that you have two daughters. How has parenting changed you, if at all?
Yeah, two daughters, well, 16, nearly 17 and 13. What I think is that I love it. I love them. I love seeing them grow. I love helping them grow. And I love believing that the last decade, maybe two now, the advancement of women in society, culture, leadership, and business has been one of the most invigorating, exciting things for me to watch. There's still a massive disconnect, don't get me wrong, when it comes to pay gap and all these other gender related issues. But where women have progressed in the last 2 decades is one of the most exciting and hopeful things for me when I think about the two daughters, Brooke and Olivia, because the world truly is for the taking and never before have women had the opportunity to not again it's not an equal footing, but man, there's systems and structures around where I'm like, rock on, friggin' let's just go and take on the world because I think so much for the first time in my life that anything is possible for you. And as we evolve that through social enterprise and other things, I actually think it's exciting to think where they could go.
What role do you believe AI will play in the future? How can the younger generation ensure that they look at AI in a positive light, despite many things that we see in the news? And of course, there's a lot of positivity and a lot of worry. So there's this huge spectrum. How do you guide your two daughters in embracing AI in a positive way and looking into the future with hope and possibility?
One of one of the realities of AI is that there is both positivity and worry, and they're both true. Right? It's not that one is right or wrong. They actually both live in tension. And I believe that AI it's an unbelievable efficiency tool. And I believe one of the biggest shifts in the way we've lived since the Industrial Revolution, really and hugely impactful on the way of life as we know it. But the tension between positivity and fear is overwhelmingly true. The reality is, it's probably one of the most significant efficiency tools ever created. And because of that, there's going to be incredible amounts of job losses. True. Worry, fear, right? True. And at the same time, there's going to be an incredible amount of new jobs created. Tension of those two will always live in constants. And I think that's one of the missed conversations when it comes to AI is that we can often say, stop worrying, look at this. Or we can say, my gosh, look at this, we need to worry. We often don't talk about the tension of both being true. And because of that, kind of giving giving credence to both sides of it. So for the people who are faced with job losses, saying, hey, that is really hard and for the people faced with job opportunities, being able to say that's really exciting. So when it comes to thinking about the next generation or my kids in that, I want to be able to posit both sides of it. I want to tell them it's one of the biggest opportunities you'll ever face in life, and it's going to come at one of the biggest costs for many people. And there is going to be a period in society and culture of great turmoil, great tension, great unsettling. It's almost like, you know, you get I don't know if you ever, as a kid, you scooped a jar of water out of a local creek or riverbed, put the lid on it, and it was just chaos. I mean, it was muddy and filthy, And all of a sudden you'd put it down at home thinking, oh, I thought that was going to be heaps cleaner. And then you'd come back to it and eventually you'd be like, wait, that water is so clear and there's all this sediment on the bottom, right? We're in the chaos phase of AI. And the truth of it is there's going to be a lot of sediment, there's going to be a lot of loss on the bottom. And in time, there's going to be a hell of a lot of clarity that comes with it. And so what I want to do with the girls is be able to talk to them about both, talking about the chaos, talking about the sediment, talking about the clarity, because I think, just like the jar, in years to come, the clarity is going to be far greater than the sediment. But we have to acknowledge the pain, the hurt, the loss that exists in the sediment, but that the top part of the clarity is going to be much bigger. Does that kind of make sense?
Absolutely. How do you define success for charitable, looking into the future in the next 5 or 10 years? What does success look like for you?
Probably twofold for me is sustainability. It's very hard with a startup as far as running it with self-funding and other things. So success would be sustainability. And to be clear on that, not wealth and riches, just sustainability. I think it's incongruent to say I want to work in the for purpose space and I want to be uber wealthy and rich. What I want is to be sustainable, to be able to earn a living and keep serving communities. So, number one is sustainability. Number two would be an impact measure. If we can remove the middleman fee structure on donations, all but completely, right? So, at the moment, we think using the charitable platform for charities would increase the average impact per dollar raised by about 17.5%. Right? If we can do that at scale, that's success, man. Because if we can help charities achieve more, do more, change more lives, then that would be amazing. So they're the two elements for me is can we get it to a point of sustainability where I can devote my life and next part of my life to this? And number two, can we really change the fee structure when it comes to middlemen and charities to focus solely on increasing the impact per dollar raised?
Based on everything we have discussed, if there would be one challenge that you could give our audience that they could pursue this week, what would that challenge be?
Would be to become comfortable with your story and to learn to articulate it because it has the most power to those who know you best. I think story is a sense making tool, it is a purpose driving tool. And too often we can sit and listen to podcasts like this thinking, and I wish he had his story. My encouragement is don't. Find language for your own story. Try and write it down into a narrative, try and become comfortable with it, and then try and redirect it, even just start telling it to someone close to you. Go out with a girlfriend for coffee and just say, hey, I'm just trying to get my mouth around this because I'm really feeling a sense of deepening purpose. And if I can use my story to do that, and I'm like, that's my encouragement is simply learn to become comfortable with your story, to articulate it well, and to share it with those around you.
Mike, it's been an immense pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you for the beautiful work and the positive impact that you're bringing to our lives. Thank you.
Thanks so much.